Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our weekly program. We are discussing the Spirit's teachings of the Gospel according to Spiritism. Almost every chapter in the Gospel according to Spiritism has one section at the end of it, which covers and is entitled as the Spirit's teachings. We're spirits on high. Some of them, we know their names, we know who they are, and some of them we don't. They give us their take, their interpretation, they add to us, to the understanding of each chapter for us. So we're deeply grateful for this beautiful manual that we have been gifted with. And today we find ourselves in chapter 16. Last week we started chapter 16, and today we will do the second half. What is the title? What is the title of chapter 16? It is You Cannot Serve Both Mammon and God, or God and Mammon, which means free money. So we're finding ourselves in items 14 and 15. We begin with 14, and it is entitled Detachment from Worldly Possessions. This is a very important study, particularly in today's climate that we're living in. So, detachment from worldly possessions. And it is written by Lacordaire, and Lacordaire will truly help us understand what our next step is. Now, let us share the screen. Hi, Tony. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for joining, dear friends. So, we're going to share the screen so that we will be able to. Oh, that was the wrong button. It's always nice to have a little bit of a visual. Okay, there we go. Almost there. Yay. All right, here we go. Okay. So again, chapter 16, items 14 to 15, and the first item 14 is by Lacordaire. So this chapter is so important that we're going to read most of it. And hopefully with the help of the visuals, we really download the information for us. So he says, brothers, sisters, and friends, I come with a small contribution to encourage you along the pathway to self-improvement on which you are now entering. So it's so sweet how the spirits are always so humble. It's a small contribution that helps us on our path to self-improvement. So what can that be? What is he teaching us? He says we're all dependent on one another. So this is download number 1. Let us remember we're all dependent on one another. We're all dependent on one another. And then he explains it even further. And he says, thus, it's only possible to achieve spiritual renewal by means of a sincere and affectionate partnership between spirits and incarnate beings. So we're all dependent on one another in this realm, but we're multidimensional beings. So we're also all dependent on one another with the spirit realm. So both on the spirit level as well as on the incarnate level. So let us remember that. Let us always be conscious wearing our bifocal lenses. Some of us are older and we have them, so we have an easier time remembering. But even for the younger people, let us remember there's 2 realms. There's actually more realms, but those are the 2 immediate realms that we're in contact with. So there's a partnership between spirits and incarnate beings, and we can't do without the other. So then he says, attachment to worldly possessions is one of the greatest obstacles to moral and spiritual improvement. So one of the greatest obstacles on our path to God is our attachment to worldly possessions. And that includes our bodies too. That does not mean we're going to neglect the body, but attachment is another step, another layer. Then he says, this fixation, this attachment, this fixation, he says, exhausts your ability to act lovingly. Now, why would he say that? Well, let us give an example. If I'm overly attached to my money, I won't be able to share it in a fraternal way, for example. And this overly fixation, this overfixation on money, which is like the attachment, that will exhaust my ability to act lovingly. And what is the opposite of acting lovingly? It's acting selfishly. So if I'm a miser, I'm hoarding it and holding on to it and never give any pennies out to anyone. That's what happens. Attachment exhausts our ability to act lovingly. So already we're checking it off. Okay, no, we don't want to do that. So how can we change it? Right? And so changing it is actually practicing a different way. So he's going to help us. He says, let's be honest with each other. Yes, let us be honest with each other. Isn't money really a mixed blessing? Do you feel that way, dear friends? Do you feel that money is a mixed blessing? Well, he says when your coffers are full, don't you still feel an emptiness in your hearts? I think we know, right? Then we buy another sweater and we buy another house and we buy another jet ski and we're just not feeling happier. It's in the moment, it's like a rush to have that new toy. But do we really feel happier? Mm-mm. We know that. So hidden at the bottom of this splendid basket of flowers, isn't there often a snake? Yes. I understand the satisfaction you feel, and quite justifiably, when you earn your fortune through honorable and persistent work. When we work hard and we're starting to accumulate some money, feels good. And Lacordaire says he knows it feels good. But from this satisfaction, which is natural and blessed, to the all absorbing attachment I'm talking about here, one that paralyzes the heart's better impulses, there is a large gap. So, see, on the one hand, it's natural that we feel satisfaction when we earn our money and we accumulate a little bit and we have a little bit of wealth. That's okay. But at the same time, to have this extreme attachment to it, this obsessive quality that we display, now that is what paralyzes our hearts. So there's a large gap between that. And then he continues to say this gap is almost as wide as the one that separates the acts of the miser on one side from those of the extravagant on the other side. And what is between these two? God places true charity. So this is what we want to find. We don't want to crawl up in the corner of the miser and become part of that. And we don't want to be part of the extravagant ones either, like squandering our money, because later on we'll learn that's still selfishness too. But the golden, when the pendulum swings to the middle, we find charity. We honor the wealth we accumulate, but we share it. And last week we learned how to share it intelligently, effectively, humbly. So we're invited to go back and read those items. They're part of the Spirit's teachings. So then he continues to say, so this gap is almost as wide as the one. Between these two extremes, God places true charity. What is true charity? The holy virtue that inspires the rich to give without making a show of giving, so that the poor can receive without feeling debased. So here he too helps us to understand there is giving and then there is delicate giving. And the delicate charity, that means we're not making a show of it. We don't say, hey, look what I did, Facebook. social media accounts, everyone sends a little heart out. No, we don't advertise it. We don't make a show of giving so that the poor can receive without feeling debased. Because even in the style of giving, we can be charitable. So it's one level after the next. We're fine-tuning our approach to life. We're helping our soul to become more evolved. So we don't want to be misers. We don't want to be extravagant. Find ourselves in the middle. So now he helps us a little bit with our potential attachment we may have towards wealth, material wealth. He says, but whether you inherited your fortune or earned it, there's something you should never forget. So it doesn't matter whether we inherited our fortune or whether we earned it. There's one thing we should not forget, and this is key, dear friends, and he's helping us with that. He says, everything comes from God, and everything goes back to God. Is that helpful? Yes, we think it's helpful. Because when we remember that it's not really ours, there's a little gap between our wealth and us. And the gap is where it's at. That's where God is. Because what we've accumulated, yes, we've done our share, but ultimately, it's God's. Our wealth is God's wealth, and God granted it to us. So hopefully that helps us to detach a little bit from it. Just having that peace, that crack in the wall of our miserliness may be very beneficial. Nothing belongs to you on this earth, he says. Nothing belongs to us on this earth, not even your own physical body. Why? Because death strips you of that as it does of every earthly thing. Even our physical body isn't ours. We have to let go of it. It's also a concession on behalf of God. You shouldn't fool yourself then. You're merely the trustees of your possession. We're merely the trustees of our possessions, not the owners. This is something we should have in our mirrors, in our cars, in our purses, wallets, wherever we are. I am merely the trustee of my possessions and not the owner, as a continual reminder. It will help us to create this gap, to release the attachment that we might have, increasingly more so. We're merely the trustees of our possessions, not the owners. God has only loaned these things to you, and they have to be returned. Moreover, they're only loaned to you on the condition that at least the surplus will be shared with people who can provide for themselves. And here comes in charity. So we've received this wealth as a concession, as a loan, and under the condition that we at least share the surplus. Much better so. In the chapter of There is no salvation without charity, we learned that actually true charity is only when there is a self-deprivation element in sharing. But he lets us off the hook easily, and he says, at least share your surplus. Sunshine, at least share your surplus. That's the guidance we receive, at least that. All right. So now he gives us an example. Assume that one of your friends lends you a certain sum of money. You make a point of conscientiously repaying the loan, and you're grateful to your friend. Now, this is exactly the position of the well-off person. God is the friend who lends you riches and wants nothing more in return than love and recognition of the loan. And love and recognition of the loan one major aspect is that we share at least the surplus of the loan we have received from God. God is the friend who lends you riches and wants nothing more in return than love and recognition of the loan. Thank you, God. However, God does expect that in turn, the affluent man or woman will share some of this loan with the needy, who are no less children of God than the affluent ones. Let us share some of this loan with the needy. Dear friends, let us remember that. Let us remember that. Nothing we own is ours, including our bodies. It's a concession on behalf of God. And we're asked to share. And this knowledge that nothing really belongs, nothing really we possess, hopefully helps us with our attachments. Now let us go into greed. He's helping us understand greed a little bit more. Often, unfortunately, the gifts of God stir up a burning and uncontrollable greed in you. So here we're receiving a gift from God. Let's say it's a few $1,000,000. And of course, we think it's all ours, and we did it, right? We are the ones to be patted on the shoulder. And yes, there's no question, we did our share, unless we inherited the money. But even then, so all of a sudden, right? There's the greed. Oh no, now we need to multiply it further. Now we need to invest it correctly to make more of it. And the story continues, right? Have you ever stopped to think on becoming overly attached to your holdings? Something just as perishable and temporary as you are, and that you will have to account one day for what God has given you? Good question, right? Have we thought about that? That we will have to account for what we did with it? And how attached we became? How greedy we've been? Have you forgotten that your wealth indicates that you've accepted a ministry of service on earth? That you've been called on to be good administrators of these resources? This is really key, dear friends. And it is here on the slide. Let us really lean into this. Have we forgotten that our wealth indicates that we have accepted a ministry of service on earth? That we have been called to be good administrators of these resources? Dear friends, this is a very deep soul-searching question for us to take into our meditation, to observe our tendencies, to see whether we have space to improve ourselves in that. It really puts wealth under the right light, doesn't it? It really helps us to hold it in with totally new energy, a totally different perspective. It's so helpful, isn't it? Because attachment and greed, they don't feel good. They always put like a burden on our shoulders, right, friends? Yes, let us continue. Isn't it logical to conclude that when you use what God has entrusted to you solely for your own benefit, you're being unfaithful trustees? Right? If we use what God has entrusted to us only for our own selves, I think we're pretty clear now that we are not good trustees. We've completely blanked out charity and all the teachings and modeling that Jesus has done to us and all the spirits thereafter. And what will be the outcome of this willing neglect of your responsibility? Death. Unbending and tireless will rip away the veil you've been hiding behind and force you to give an account to the friend you've forgotten and who at that moment stands before your conscience as judge. We can't avoid it, even if we think we can hide out, as long as we're in our physical bodies on planet Earth. There's really no secrets. They all come out, and we are the ones who have to look at them. Don't fool yourselves by trying to present your selfishness under the guise of virtue. Now he's asking us to be honest with ourselves most and foremost, because from the honesty within our own selves comes the honesty that we display to our brothers and sisters. Can't be the reverse. So let us be honest. Don't fool yourselves by trying to present your selfishness under the guise of virtue. It won't work. And it's just as useless to refer to your stinginess as economy and foresight. Those nice euphemisms we like to use, right? Oh no, I'm not stingy, I'm frugal, or I am practicing economy and foresight. And we may be to a certain degree. There is nothing wrong with it, right? We don't want to knock anything, but we want to see with the flashlight and the shovel whether we can dig a little bit deeper and see whether there isn't any wiggle space to be a little more honest with ourselves. Or pretend that your excesses, which primarily benefit you, are really acts of generosity. So are our excesses of spending, are they really benefiting others? Or are they really acts of generosity? Or are they maybe also selfish? For example, so he always helps us with an example. He says, for example, the parents who abstain from giving to charity economize and amass a considerable amount of money in order to leave their children, as they put it, with enough money so that they will never know poverty. Right? Oh yeah, I'm not giving to any charities because I want to keep it all for my children to inherit. Now, let's see what he says about that. This is reasonable and parent-like. Thank you. I agree, and no one can criticize them for it. So we like that. But there is a little bit more. But is this the only motive behind their actions? Or is this the only motive behind our actions? See, this is what we're being asked to be a little more truthful. Let's look a little deeper in our souls. Doesn't it often represent an excuse before their own conscience to justify their personal attachment to worldly goods through the claim of leaving a large inheritance? Are we a little bit pretentious, maybe thinking, oh, that's a nice mask I can hide under. Tonight is Halloween, right? So, yeah, this is a nice mask of economy and foresight, saving it for our children. But there may be a little bit more, right? Maybe it's my stinginess. Maybe it's my fear of survival that keeps me holding on to it, that I just want to gloss over. That's for us to find out. That's our own inner research, right, friends? So then he says, when they've already amassed more than enough, will they really be leaving their children to lives of poverty if they have just a little less? Will it really be impoverishing our children if they have a little less and we actually share it also with those who are in need? By acting in this way, they are in reality giving their children a lesson in selfishness. This is interesting, right? So, by not sharing our wealth with anyone but our children, he's saying that we're actually giving our children a lesson in selfishness. Why is that? Let us see. We lost the spot. So, giving a lesson in selfishness and hardening their children's hearts, a lesson that will cause their love for their neighbors to wither away. Are we actually fostering selfishness and hardness of heart by not sharing? Mothers and fathers, you are under a delusion. If you think this is the way to earn your children's affection, wow, ouch, right? He's pretty honest. He's asking us to be honest, but he's honest with us. And we enjoy that because then that gives us the rope to climb higher. It helps us. It gives us direction, right, friends? Even though it may hurt in the moment, it's good to look at that. And then he says, by teaching them, our children, to be selfish with others, you're only teaching them to be selfish with you too. So now it's not only that we're teaching them and modeling to them to be selfish with others, because I kept it all for you, my child. And this is the modeling I do all my life. I didn't share it with anyone else. I gave it to you. So that now models selfishness. And what will happen when our children are selfish? Then they may be selfish towards us as well. So if we think we're buying love that way, that's never quite a clean path, right, friends? So it's a very interesting lesson, isn't it? It's very interesting and very almost confrontational, right? For us to look deeper and see what are truly our motives. Thank you for the lesson, Lacordaire. But he's not done. He's continuing. He's on a roll tonight. So let us see what he says next. Now he talks about stinginess, and as the first item. So let us educate ourselves a little bit more about stinginess. People who've worked hard all their life and accumulated material things by the sweat of their brow are often heard to say that one appreciates the value of money better when one works for it. This is very true, right? The harder we've worked for our money, the more we appreciate it because we know what it took to get there, right? So that's a fact. So then what happens? This is very true. Well, then, those who declare they know the full value of money have all the more reason for being charitable, right? Now that we know how hard we had to work to earn our wealth, we should have more reason for being charitable. And why is that? Let us see. Their merit will be greater than that of someone who was born to wealth and didn't know the value of hard work. On the other hand, if those self-made people who remember well their own sufferings and trials are selfish and heartless towards the poor, they will be guiltier than the hard-hearted person who was born wealthy. Why? Why is the hardworking person which accumulated his or her wealth and doesn't share it with those in need guiltier than the one who was born with wealth? Let us see the answer. He says, why? Why is that? Because the more you know from your own experience about the hidden distress of not having enough to make ends meet, the greater your desire should be to help others. Makes sense, right? The more we've struggled to become wealthy or create a little nest egg, the more we are asked to share because we know better. We know how it feels to be poor. We know how hard it was to get here. And if we now say, oh, I worked so hard for my wealth, forget it. I'm going to hold on to it. I worked for it, right? That makes us actually more guilty because now we're hard-hearted. Now we don't have any compassion with those who are struggling as we did before. Very interesting and important perspective, dear friends, isn't it? Very important for us to be cognizant of. So then he talks about pride now, arrogant pride. So this was stinginess, right? So we fine-tuned our perspective on stinginess. Now let us see what he says about arrogant pride. Unfortunately, the well-to-do often exhibit a trait as strong as their attachment to money, and that is arrogant pride. So apart from our attachment to money, when we're wealthy, we also have arrogant pride. Frequently, you will see a moneyed person bedazzling someone who is seeking their help with tales of their success and abilities. Right? The lecture. In the end, rather than offer help, they often say, work hard as I did. And we also need to guard ourselves as parents, right? To not play that card. So let us not be arrogantly prideful. Work hard as I did. Of course, according to this way of thinking, God's providence played no role in their becoming wealthy. Where we totally blanked that out at that moment, because now we're in our pride, all we see is ourselves and that we worked hard for the money. They all alone take the credit for it. Their pride has blinded and deafened them. Despite having intelligence and talent, they still don't understand that their atrophy world position is fragile and that providence may change it at the moment's notice. Dear friends, again, let us remember that everything is God's and comes from God. We're just the caretakers. So now he's talking about squandering wealth. So first stinginess, now pride, and now just pride, and now his next one is squandering the wealth, because we know that's the other extreme, right? So squandering wealth is scarcely a demonstration of detachment from worldly goods either. So this is also important to note, right? So squandering wealth is not a demonstration of detachment from worldly goods. It is rather a sign of carelessness and indifference. Human beings, as the trustees of these goods, have as little right to squander their wealth as they do to keep it solely for themselves. So both extremes are not what we want to find ourselves with. We don't want to be misers and we don't want to squander the wealth. Profligate use of money is not the same as true generosity. Indeed, it is often a form of selfishness. So Lacordaire is very clear, isn't it? It really helps us understand money and wealth. And that is really a big deal in our society. So it is very important for us to really understand this chapter that he wrote. So let us continue. He's not done, friends. So now he's coming to true detachment, right? So we know we are to attach to money. And that breeds greed. Now, on the one hand, we're either misers or we often squander our wealth. Neither one takes into consideration that there are needy people. And we, in the meantime, also forget that we're actually just the trustees of this loan that God gave us. And we're here to share. And ideally, not only share of our surplus, but at least of our surplus. But ideally, true charity is actually pinching ourselves a little bit in the process, having a little less and feeling it. But now, what is true detachment? So true detachment, being truly detached from worldly goods, means appreciating them according to their real value, knowing how to use them for the benefit of others and not just ourselves, refusing to sacrifice our interest in a future life because of them, and being able to part with them without a murmur when the divine will so determines. In other words, what is he saying? Being truly detached means we know how to use our worldly goods for the benefit of others. The knowledge of how to use our wealth for the benefit of others. And not just for ourselves. It is sacrificing our interest in a future life. And it means we're being able to part with wealth without complaint when God so wills. So when all of a sudden the tide turns and bingo, there we lost it in the stock market or in the cryptocurrency or wherever, in the housing market, or some calamity hits and we lose all the money, maybe in medical bills, whatever the story is. True detachment is that we won't complain at all when God takes it away from us. It's a hard one, isn't it? So he continues. Should unforeseeable circumstances reduce you to the condition of Job, say as he did, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Beautiful, isn't it? Let's say it again. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. This is our mantra when the calamities hit. That's true detachment. That's true detachment. Most importantly, consider that there are things far more precious than any you will find on earth. Let us remember there are things that are far more precious than what we find on earth. And that's another one of our traps, that our vision is myopic. We can't look past the tip of our nose. We think this is it. We forget that we're multidimensional beings, that they were always, as the chapter started off, we're dependent on each other in all realms. So there is more than what we find here on earth. And we know that. Why? This thought will help you to have the strength to move on. Remember, we're working on true detachment. Remember that the less attached you are to something, the less sensitive you will be to its loss. Makes sense. The person who holds on to material things is like a child who sees only the moment. The person who achieves detachment is like the wise adult who sees the more important things in life and understands fully the prophetic words of the Savior, of Jesus. What did he say, friends? My kingdom is not of this world. That's what he meant by it. There are things far more precious than any we will find on earth. True detachment. When God gives, thank you. When God takes, thank you. That is our goal, to reach true detachment. Now he says, God doesn't require people to give up what they own. So this is also very important. God does not require people to give up what they own. So in other words, we won't give up everything we own and be happy, as Klaus Schwab, who is heading the World Economic Council, the New World Order. I don't know whether you guys heard him say that. You will own nothing and be happy. Well, we'll see how that manifests. But we know now that God does not require people to give up what they own. This would only condemn them to voluntary poverty and quickly make them burdens to society. To proceed in this way is to misunderstand the true meaning of detachment. So to take everything away from us is a misunderstanding of the true meaning of detachment from worldly goods. It is selfishness of another kind, since individuals who act on this idea exempt themselves from the responsibility of putting their money to good uses. So right at this moment, maybe the ones who demand for us to give up of our wealth and be happy, maybe they're not doing the same thing. We don't know, maybe. But it also deprives us of doing the good with the gift from God. Once we're condemned to voluntary poverty, we won't be able to do any good anymore, right? So let us remember it is selfishness of another kind. Why? Because at that moment, we're exempted from the responsibility of putting our money to good use. There's a whole chapter of practice for our own soul improvement that will be canceled and taken away from us in a situation like that. So this is really, really important, isn't it, to know that? Providence gives wealth to people who have the ability to administer it for the benefit of society, which means not everyone will be wealthy. We can't expect that everyone is wealthy. And we know that wealth is the harder trial. There's reasons for some being more wealthy than others, we're learning. The person with money has been given a mission rich with meaning for others. Beautiful, isn't it? So the ones of us who are wealthier than others, we were given a mission, a very important mission, not to be taken away from us, which meaning a mission rich with meaning for others as well as for themselves. To reject wealth, which is a gift of providence, is to reject the benefits of the good it can do. So this is also really, really important. Number one, providence gives wealth to people who have the ability to administer it for the benefit of society. To reject wealth, which is a gift of providence, is to reject the benefits of the good it can do. So it's not so easy, right? It's not like, oh, all wealth is wrong. Oh, all poverty is good. Yes, we won't own anything and be happy. It's much more delicate, much more complicated, because we have to remember God. And I'm pointing up. We could be pointing here, right? Doesn't matter where we point. So, all right. So to reject wealth, which is a gift of providence, is to reject the benefits of the good it can do. Now, let's see. It's still very juicy what he's saying. By knowing how to do without it when you don't have it, how to use it properly when you get it, and how to give it up when that becomes necessary, you are proceeding according to God's wishes. So this is also vital. So let us say it again very slowly. This is our goal. This is what we're working towards. Maybe some of us are here already, but there's maybe still space to fine tune ourselves. So by knowing how to do without wealth, so by knowing how to do without money when we don't have it, how to use it properly when we get it, and how to give it up when that becomes necessary, you are proceeding according to God's wishes. And what are we always learning? Let us align our will with God's will. God gives and God takes. God gives and God takes. Nobody else. That is key. Let us not forget about God. Let us hope then that if you are one of those people who have come into what is called in the world good fortune, you will be able to say, "My Lord, you have entrusted me with a new mission. Give me the strength to fulfill it according to your wishes." So when we have received money, wealth, whatever, property, whatever it may be, this is our prayer. It is, "My Lord, you have entrusted me with a new mission. Lord, you have entrusted me with a new mission. Give me the strength to fulfill it according to your wishes." That is alignment with God. And we need to be careful that we stay humble in that and not as humans, so-called manhandle wealth from the top down, as well as among ourselves and within ourselves. Very important. So let's see. Then he wraps up. Now he gives us the summary. Friends, this is the sum of what I wanted to share with you about living with detachment. I would summarize it by saying, know how to be content with only a little. So if God wills it so, let us be content. Let us not complain. There is a reason for this, right? So know how to be content with only a little. If you don't have much, don't envy the rich. Don't envy the rich, because money isn't necessarily happiness. If you're a person of means, don't forget that your money has only been entrusted to you and that you will have to account for the way you used it. Just as on earth, you will have to account for an investment that you're responsible for. So money has only been entrusted to us, and we have to account for how we used the money. Don't be an unfaithful trustee. So we're invited to be a faithful trustee, using your money only to satisfy your own vanity and sensuality. So we're not supposed to use our money only for vanity and sensuality. That would not be a faithful trustee. Don't think you have the right to dispose of a loan as if it were a gift entirely for your own benefit. So we're not using the loan only for our own benefit. If you don't know how to honor the loan, don't ask for wealth. Oh, I want to win this lottery. I want to place my money in the right cryptocurrency, right? Then do we remember all of this, the responsibility that comes with it? Or do we then forget and it's just my work and it's for me, right? So then he says, don't ask for wealth. You are not ready for it then. And remember that the person who shares of abundance settles a loan received from God. Let us remember the person who shares of abundance settles a loan received from God. That is why it is important that when we are wealthy, there's a reason for this. It's a mission. It can't be annulled. It has to be honored on all levels, dear friends. So then that completes Lacordaire. And we have one more quick question that St. Louis was asked. And the question is, does the principle which says that human beings are only the trustees of the goods in their possession take away their right to leave that wealth to their descendants? So in other words, Allan Kardec is now wondering, since we are only trustees of the wealth that we have at our hands, does that mean that we are not allowed to leave that wealth to our descendants because it's God's loan? And the answer is no. They have a perfect right to leave to their loved ones what they enjoyed during life. Okay? But this right is always subject in the last instance to the will of God. So yes, we have the right to give our children or family members an inheritance, but it falls under the will of God. So let's see what that is. In the last instance, but this right is always subject to the will of God, who can prevent the descendants from getting or at least enjoying their inheritance. So if they're not meant to have money, this mission of owning wealth, then God can prevent it. This is the reason so many apparently solid fortunes collapse. The wealthy person's plan may be powerless when it comes to keeping a fortune in the hands of descendants. This fact, however, does not take away someone's right to transfer the loan received from God, since God can take it away whenever circumstances warrant. And this is our St. Louis who says that. We have the right to leave to our loved ones what we enjoyed during life, but this right is subject to the will of God. That's why some fortunes just collapse. It's up to God. It's God's wealth that was given to us temporarily. Friends, this was so exciting. This was so important, wasn't it? For us to understand the one thing that most of us, we're all dealing with it every day. Money is just so central in our lives still, on planet Earth, that it's really important to get more clarity in all of it. So I hope you learned as much as I did, or hopefully so much more. Thank you so much for joining. So God willing, we will meet again next week, same place, same time, and we will start a new chapter. Be perfect. Let's see how we can even further perfect ourselves after this chapter. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, Teresa. Thank you so much for joining as well. Much love, dear friends. Bye.